I've got good news and bad news. The good news is it looks like you guys are getting Dennis on Thursday. And the bad news is you might be done with me for a while. Oh, that's a sad face. Thank you. Screw you, Dennis. Just kidding. So yeah, I was going through these slides and I realized we really only had one lecture worth of stuff on the muscle oxygen delivery response to exercise, which is going to feed really nicely into the next thing on the schedule, which is the net conformer possible hypothesis. I shouldn't even talk. This will be a fun lecture. Anyway, so I think that I still have to like 100% confirm, but I think we're going to bump forward basically one lecture in the schedule. But don't get too stressed out about it. Like I think Dennis said he's got 4 lectures worth of material on the pulmonary stuff, so you guys might just get 4 on the pulmonary instead of 2 on this. Is anyone really upset about that? You wanted to learn more about muscle oxygen delivery? We've basically been talking about it the whole time. Okay. Oh my God, who are my pericardium people? You know who you are. You don't know who you are unless none of you are here. Oh no, the pericardium people, none of them showed up today. There's a pericardium guy. White shirt. You asked me about the pericardium, right? Yes. Did anyone else? White sweater. This is what happens when you're not the student of the day. Did you ask me about the pericardium?
No. I asked.
You asked me about the pericardium. Good. Dana. Okay, I'm bringing it up because I messaged Dennis. And okay, sorry. I have this slide here because remember the whole thing was that if you cut the pericardium on an animal, you really increase their stroke volume cardiac output during exercise, and you can exercise to a much higher VO2 max. Does anyone remember what the point of all that was? Like what that? It probably says on the screen. Don't look at the screen. You're all looking at the screen. Don't look at the screen. Okay, so the answer was that it proves that stroke volume is a limitation to VO2 max. That the fact that the pericardium constrains your stroke volume. If it was just muscle blood flow that was constraining your VO2 max and not letting you get to really high VO2 maxes, then when you cut the pericardium and allowed stroke volume to increase even more, you wouldn't see any more of an increase in VO2 max. Does that make sense? But since when we cut the pericardium, so the muscle usage at the level of the muscle, oxygen use at the level of the muscle, has not changed. All we've done is provided more cardiac output, and we're able to increase VO2 max. And the leg's able to use more because we're giving it more oxygen, more blood flow. Are we all cool with that? Perfect. So then I had some people come up to me at the end of class and said, so I'm putting words into the mouth, like why is Lance Armstrong not cutting his pericardium, and why don't we, all of us elite athletes, have cut pericardiums? And I was like, that's a great freaking question. Like, I'm sure it has like a use for walking around, there's a reason we don't do it, but I don't know why. So everyone who asked me the question, while I look up Dennis's answer, did anyone find anything interesting about the pericardium? Just start yelling while I Google pericardium. Nothing? It's funny because I texted Dennis or emailed Dennis. Oh God, I hate this freaking app. Oh, I'm on camera. I forgot I was recording already. I normally don't record these. Dennis gave me this beautiful answer, and I was like, how did you know this? I didn't know you were a pericardium expert, and then he said, you Googled it. Okay. Which makes me feel like a real idiot. Because I was Googling like pericardium elite athletes, like seeing if anyone did it, and there was nothing. So I was like, I give up, but I think you probably just Google pericardium and I found this. All right, you guys ready? This is not on your exam, this is just fun facts. Because there were like legit 5 people who had that same question. Dennis Jensen says, while the pericardium is not essential for life, i.e. the heart can maintain normal function with, I assume he means without it, it does serve the following productive functions. Keeps heart within the chest cavity, i.e. fixes it to the mediastinum. Prevents the heart from overexpanding when blood volume increases. Limits heart motion. Reduces friction between the heart and the surrounding tissues. This is long, I'm not even halfway through. Contains pericardial fluid and provides a lubrication for the heart. And perhaps most importantly, protects the heart against infection. Oh yeah, and then, sorry, the rest is just like, I think he got the impression that I was telling you all that you should cut your pericardiums, and like, the moral of the story is stroke volume limits VO2 max. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Dennis knows all the answers, is the moral of that story. I hope he's listening. response of oxygen delivery to a step increase in exercise intensity. So here you are at rest, hanging out, and then all of a sudden we do a step increase, so all of a sudden you start exercising. What does the muscle blood flow response look like? So again, here we have rest, and here's our arbitrary, am I yelling? I feel like I'm yelling. Is this my normal volume? I don't know, I'm really out of it. I'm very stressed out, guys. Okay. Okay, so rest, here's our arbitrary level of muscle blood flow. So boom, you start exercise here. I want to be clear, this is one intensity of exercise. And what you end up getting is this phase 1 response. So we have right away an increase in muscle blood flow coupled to this plateauing of muscle blood flow. So right off the bat, increased muscle blood flow, which plateaus. And then we have this phase 2 increase, starting around 20 seconds, although we can quantify this when this happens. So then phase 2 is this sort of more, further increase and more sustained. And basically, the reasons for this are what we're going to talk about in this lecture. So if anyone has any questions, please just ask them, because I don't know if you look, but there's like 14 slides in this lecture. Because in theory, Dennis would have just moved on with the next part, but that's his part, and I don't want to take it. So we can just chit-chat. Talk about our days. We can all go down to the lab and look at a nerve site. Wouldn't that be fun? I'm just kidding, we can't. Yeah, thank you. I would just have kept talking.
So phase 1 and phase 2 are actually the same intensity, or phase 1 is one?
All the same intensity. So we've like put you on a bike, dropped a weight, and increased your intensity, and you're probably not a bike because we're measuring muscle blood flow, but yeah. So it's one intensity. There was no change in intensity between phase 1 and phase 2. That's a great question. A very important point. Okay, and so phase 1, this is going back to our feed-forward, feedback stuff that we talked about a couple weeks ago, I guess. Phase 1 is purely feed-forward. So these are, rather than sort of like central command kind of feed-forward, that's what I always think when I think of feed-forward, because I'm a neural person, don't really care about everything else. These are sort of muscle feed-forward. So the first is the muscle pump. Raise your hand if you've heard of the muscle pump. Have I talked about the muscle pump? Nice, good. I love the muscle pump because it's really easy to understand. And then rapid vasodilation. And this is good times too. We do these kinds of things in my lab that we're going to be talking about. And then phase 2 is feedback, and these are local metabolites. So feed forward again, things that are happening kind of like, I was going to say regardless of intensity, but they're not regardless of intensity. Then feedback is sort of a response that's going to be directly related to the intensity of the contraction and the cost of the contraction, which are the metabolite production. Yeah.
What's the muscle?
Oh, I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to tell you all of these things. Great question. I love the questions. Keep them coming. Okay, so remember this? I say remember this, hoping that we've gone over this, but if we haven't, so this is the equation for muscle blood flow, which is equal to the pressure difference between the arterial side and the venous side times vascular conductance. And you might notice like this equation, like if you're memorizing equations, this is basically the same thing as like mean arterial pressure. So we can talk about, instead of like the pressure difference across a vascular bed, we can talk about the body's mean arterial pressure. Instead of blood flow, we can talk about cardiac output. Instead of muscle vascular conductance, we can talk about total vascular conductance. So these are all the same equations, just like on a whole body level versus on a muscle level. This is me trying to encourage you to memorize as little as possible and understand as much as possible. Yeah. Okay. So let's get into this phase 1. So again, we start our exercise here, and boom, we get a really quick increase in muscle blood flow. And again, through this lecture, we're just talking about in your active muscle. This is all active muscle blood flow. I just mentioned the whole body to make it easier, but I hope I didn't throw you off. We're hanging out in the muscle today. So 2 primary mechanisms here, muscle pump and rapid vasodilation. So, some beautiful slides going on here. So, here are the arterioles inside your muscle. I always kind of find this easiest. I always picture the calf, and I picture kind of one vein going up through the middle. So sorry, arterial side, venous side. Can you see my pointer? Venous side, arterial side. Actually, I think he's got animations. There we go. So arterial inflow in red here, venous outflow in blue. And you've also got the pressure. So this is obviously arterial. We know this, right? That the veins have really low pressure. Good. Okay. So, yeah, I always picture kind of the calf because I think that's when I'm standing up. I did talk about this. Because I talk about how I'm always like moving around a little bit because I have really low blood pressure and my blood will 100% pool in my lower body and I'll pass out. So yeah. So it doesn't really work because there's 3 of them here to picture your calf muscles, but regardless. So you've got skeletal muscles, so you're sitting at rest, or maybe just, I guess if I'm standing, some of my muscles are a little bit contracted, so it's maybe not a great example. I was about to say picture me lying in bed, but maybe don't do that. Anyway, picture someone lying in bed without their muscles activated. So arterial blood is just going in normally, venous blood is leaving normally. This picture has these fun little doohickeys here. Does anyone know what these are? Or meant to represent? This is obviously not a real picture.
What doohickeys?
Hey?
What doohickeys? What are you talking?
Yeah, sorry, my pointer sucks. Hey, you see?
Oh,
What is that?
Valves. I heard valves. Valves is the correct answer. I feel like a game show host. I heard valves. Okay. This will be a really annoying lecture. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so these are valves, which is the other way you can tell it's the venous side. What do the valves do?
Maintain unidirectional muscle.
Stop it. Nice. Wow, that was beautiful. Really nicely said. Exactly. So they're going to make sure the blood flow goes this way and only this way. We don't need them on the arterial side because we've got the heart pumping away and making sure blood only goes one way. But on the venous side, pressure is really low. Obviously, it's separated from the arterial side by this capillary bed. And so blood would just keep on pumping back down, or falling back down into your feet constantly when you're standing up. So we've got valves to make sure blood goes one way. Maintain unidirectional. I love that. Perfect. Okay. And then again, so venous pressure is 20 millimeters of mercury, and arterial is 100. Then the pressure differential across this vascular bed is 80 millimeters of mercury, so pretty good. But we can increase it. Okay, so now we flex. Maybe the easiest thing is to picture your bicep, because that's a really flexy muscle, especially on me, just bulging out. Okay, I don't know who laughed over there, but I do not appreciate you laughing at my muscle tongue. Okay, so you're sitting here, and the blood is kind of going back to the heart in a mamby-pamby way. It's coming back slowly. We're at 20 millimeters mercury, especially because my hand is at heart level. This is on purpose. I'm foreshadowing. So I contract, and what happens is my giant biceps squish down on the arteries and the veins inside the muscle. This picture sucks a little bit because does anyone know what happens when you squish down on an artery? The answer is not a lot. If you squish down real hard, you can compress it a little bit, but that's actually something in the lab. If we're doing ultrasound, and like your image kind of looks like, this is not going to mean anything to you if you don't do ultrasound, but if you've got an image of the leg, kind of you're at a cross section, and you've got 2 vessels here, and you don't know which one's the vein and which one's the artery, you press down, sorry, this is the femoral, we're doing femoral artery, this means nothing if you're not in the lab, but you push down onto it, and what you'll end up getting is the vein, it's not going to move, but I'm going to draw it to the side, will go like this, and the artery will basically stay like that. Because the arteries have really thick vascular smooth muscle around them, so they're very resistant to deformation. You can easily collapse a vein if you apply pressure to it, but the arteries are harder. Now, if you get up to like massive contraction, massive pressure, maybe that's why this diagram is showing the artery collapsing a little bit, but it's never going to collapse all the way, or at least it shouldn't. Okay. Although I say that, and with FMD we do collapse it. So anyway, arterioles are highly resistant to compression, basically. The moral of the story to take away from this is the veins are super susceptible to compression. So you flex this muscle, all your muscles are bigger now, because they're shortening, so they're cross-section, so they're squeezing. The blood vessels And what happens here is just like our whoopee cushion, I guess, has been my wonderful example. You squish it and like all the air in the whoopee cushion is squeezing out, all of the blood in the veins is squeezing out. Again, the valves come into play because they would come back into the capillary bed if you didn't have valves. And because we do have that, which would be horrible, but because we do have valves, all the blood is going one way, which is back towards the heart. So you've expelled the venous volume. And a small, again, impeding of arterial inflow because this artery, so we're squeezing harder than we are when we're pushing with our ultrasound probes. And then the real trick comes in that when we relax the muscle again, now the arteries are coming back out. So we've restored pressure on the arterial side. And because we don't have any blood flow in the veins, because we just expelled all of it, this is really the key here, that pressure in the venous side is down, my pointer sucks, is down at 0 millimeters mercury. Which means that our pressure differential is now 100, whereas before it was 80. So we've got a bigger pressure differential. What does this mean for muscle blood flow? Beautiful. Goes up. Or you were giving me the thumbs up and telling me my lecture is great today. Thank you. And then, of course, as the blood courses back in through the arterial side, we get all this inflow. Now the blood's going to go back onto the venous side, and we're back over to sort of that resting state. So the muscle pump increases muscle blood flow by increasing the pressure gradient between the arteries and veins with each muscle contraction. So every time you're contracting that muscle, you're squeezing blood out of the venous side, returning it back to the heart, increasing that pressure gradient, more muscle blood flow through. And then the result of all of this is that the effect of the muscle pump is greatest immediately when the muscle is relaxed. And then it decreases as the veins fill. And why does it decrease while the veins fill? A little louder. I heard whispering. I think it was Dom.
And Max.
I looked at you.
Basically, we're saying that the pressure gradient gets smaller.
Perfect. Because you're building pressure on the venous side, exactly. Because you're getting the blood's coming through from the arterial side. Any questions about the muscle pump? So if you're someone that gets lightheaded and you have to stand for a long period of time, get your muscle pump going and like move. You can move your legs around. You can also like cross your legs if you don't want to look like, well, I guess I was going to say if you don't want to look like you have to pee, but this kind of looks like you have to pee more. But you want to like get contractions going and you want it to be sort of like pulsatile because you want to contract, relax, contract. You don't want to just be contracting your legs. Make sense? Nobody wanted low blood pressure, but that was a big life changer for me. Okay, another beautiful picture here. So when I said I had my arm out and it was at heart level, and that it's going to make a difference, any ideas as to why that the position of the arm would make a difference on the effectiveness of the muscle pump? So in this example, we've got a guy lying on a bed, and at one point his arm is up, and at one point his arm is down. Yo.
Is it the effects of gravity?
Yes, very good. Perfect. So gravity is causing, when it's above heart level, blood to pool with gravity towards your heart. And then you have it below, so now gravity is causing it to pool away from the heart. So what do you think happens with the muscle pump when the arm's above heart level? Any guesses?
Doesn't work.
Yeah. Killing it. Aha. So the muscle pump is only effective when the exercising muscle is below the heart level, because that's when blood is pooling in those veins. When the muscle is above heart level, there's no venous pooling. So in theory, you are still like pushing on it. You still have the muscle part, you just don't have the pumping. Well, it's pumping, but it's just pumping nothing. There's nothing to pump. So you need to have, for this to be effective and to have that muscle pump induced increase in blood flow, the exercising limb has to be below heart level. Any questions? Muscle pump, super easy, see? Told you. Operates by increasing the pressure gradient between the arteries and the veins, going back to the mass and the heat flow model. Please know your models when Dennis comes back, or he's going to yell at me for not talking about them enough. I don't know what my distribution is. And the muscle pump is most effective immediately upon relaxation. And its effectiveness declines as the veins fill because, again, we have less of a pressure gradient. Conservation of mass model. And it's ineffective when your limb is above heart level, you're exercising. Cool. Okay. Really killing time here. Okay, I know you guys all have midterms. I'm not actually killing time. Okay, so second mechanism I talked about is rapid vasodilation, and here we go, flow-mediated dilation. I talk about this all the time in my lab and in my office. If you ever come to me, I probably talk to you about this. It's good times. Okay, so this is immediately present. Again, remember we saw that phase 1 shot up right away. And this happens in proportion to the muscle activation because it's related to tension development and motor unit recruitment. So flow-mediated dilation. I can't say it. Is everyone cool if I just call it FMD? Okay, thanks. This is what we call it in the lab, and every time I have to say it, it's like that in vascular smooth muscle cell. I can't say quickly. So first of all, let's look at our, our picture of the arteriole. So I drew this on the board, I think, not too long ago. If you weren't here, you missed it. My beautiful drawing. So the endothelium is the inner layer of the blood vessel. And then right outside, so here's like the lumen where your blood's going. Here's the endothelium, so these are endothelial cells. And then wrapping around that are our vascular smooth muscle cells. So these are the ones that are really strong, that are going to help the arterioles from collapsing, keep tension, etc. And those are the ones that when you want to constrict that blood vessel, it's the vascular smooth muscle cells that contract and cause that diameter to get decreased. Okay. So what is flow-mediated dilation? So here now we're looking at like a longitudinal view. This is actually what we look at when we do ultrasound to measure FMD. So here again we have our endothelial cells, these purple fellows. And then this yellow fellow is, I think, supposed to be the vascular smooth muscle cells. And going through the middle here we have, does anyone know what those dots are? Red blood cells, yes. So, as red blood cells are flowing through a vascular bed, the ones at the side of the vessel are rubbing along the sides of the vessel, along those endothelial cells. So the endothelial cells are inside, on the very inside of the artery, and as red blood cells are rubbing by them, they are detecting the rubbing, which is called shear stress. When you have an increase in shear stress, the endothelial cells detect this and create, does anyone know? Have you gone ahead in your notes? Can you see it in your notes? Does anyone happen to know this? Nitric oxide. So one of the things that we do in the lab all the time, I'm just going to put a diagram in, but sorry, I ran out of time. So what we'll do is we put a blood pressure cuff around the lower part of the arm to restrict blood flow into the arm. And we leave it like that for 5 minutes. And the whole time we're actually using ultrasound up here in the brachial artery to see exactly this. We can't see each individual red blood cell, but what we can see is the flow and the velocity of blood going through. If we leave this cuff inflated for 5 minutes, and it's 5 minutes, this is like a standardized test that people do in labs all over the world, you deflate it, and what's going to happen? Yeah, exactly. So a rapid inflow of blood. And in fact, because you left that cuff inflated for 5 minutes, all of the blood vessels, all of the tissues inside your arm and forearm and your hand are becoming hypoxic. They're producing metabolites. So actually all those blood vessels are vasodilating. I'm not talking about exercise right now, so don't panic. This is more for you to improve your understanding. So all these blood vessels are vasodilating. So when you, deflate this cuff, you get a huge influx of blood. So more blood flow through, more red blood cells streaming through this vessel, more rubbing on the sides of the blood vessel, more shear stress. So I always picture this like you're at like a sporting event, let's say you're at a Habs game, and you're walking through the hallways, like you left 2 minutes before the end of the game, and there's, whatever, 50 people in that hallway, so you're probably all in the middle, probably no one's brushing up against the sides. But all of a sudden the game lets out, and everyone pours out of the arena, and now there's like, whatever, 500 people in that hallway, or 1,000, and like you're getting brushed up against the sides. There's more of you brushing against the walls. Same thing, you release that blood pressure cuff, or if there's anything that's causing a really rapid increase in blood flow through, or an increase in shear stress basically, so an increase in those red blood cells rubbing against the sides, you're going to have more shear stress, more nitric oxide production, and oh, I missed the big part. What does nitric oxide do? Vasodilates, I heard it. So nitric oxide is a really potent vasodilator. So it causes those vascular smooth muscle cells to relax, and so you get a vasodilation. So it's a really nice mechanism of the body saying, aha, we need more blood flow. We've got all of this shear stress. Like, it's like someone would be sitting in the Bell Center and watching the hallways and being like, oh, okay, we need to increase the wall size to allow more people through. And then the walls would just go, whoop, that'd be so nice. So that's what we're really missing, is shear stress. Okay. So shear stress, again, is a stimulus for endothelial production and release of nitric oxide, which actually is going to diffuse into the vascular smooth muscle and, again, cause those cells to relax. And as I said, shear stress is the force of the flowing blood, specifically those red blood cells, on the endothelial surface. Red blood cells rub up against the endothelial cells, stimulate the production and release of nitric oxide, causing rapid vasodilation of those vascular smooth muscle cells. And of course, we vasodilate, radius increases to the power of 4, we get a decrease in resistance, which is the same thing as an increase of vascular conductance, and then an increase in muscle blood flow, which is a callback to previous lectures. Do you have a question, or are you just touching your head? You do have a question.
Where does the nitric oxide come from?
The endothelial cells. So there's something called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, ENOS. Obviously you don't have to know, it's not in your slide, but if you care, which I know you do. So shear stress upregulates ENOS and then nitric oxide production. Estrogen also upregulates nitric oxide synthase. Not in your exam, but a fun fact. That's one of the things I research. Okay. Okay, so any questions on the flow-mediated dilation? So increase in shear stress, the level of an active muscle. So for instance, you've activated your muscle pump. So now as we're pumping and we're like getting more blood flow through, we've got this increased pressure gradient, more blood coming through, more shear stress. We're gonna dilate because of that shear stress. So it's all it's all building on itself. Yeah.
And we were talking about local factors in the previous lecture overriding sympathetic or vasoconstriction. Is this it?
Yes, one of them. Yeah, exactly. Because at the same time, well, no. I forgot the central command. Okay, someone email me. If you email me, then I'll look up the central command thing. Unless it's not bothering any of you. It's really bothering me, I just forget. So once the sympathetic nervous system has been stimulated with metabolite production, so we're talking about phase 1 right now, so the sympathetic nervous system, remember, takes about 20 seconds to kick on for those metabolites to start building up. But yeah, this will keep going as exercise is continuing, and so once the sympathetic, this is one of those things that's coming from inside the blood vessel. I just got a horror, oh, it's Halloween, like the horror movie, the call is coming from inside the house. Bad joke, City, and Yasmin's not going to roll her eyes at me. Yeah.
So the increasing blood flow is from muscle pump.
Well, anything that's causing an increase in shear stress, but the muscle pump would be causing that increase in shear
What
stress.
about increasing cardio?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Anything that's driving that high energy state, great point. or decreasing, so an increase in cardiac output, perfect, increasing the high energy component, the arterial inflow, and then the muscle pump is decreasing the low energy component by decreasing venous pressure. So yes, exactly, both of those things will be increasing flow through and increasing shear stress. Does that make sense? That was a great question. Okay, another rapid vasodilation would be potassium. Is potassium? This figure kind of made me laugh, but I think Dennis has an animation here that's going to make it a little more obvious. So basically, actually, let's go through the animation first. So here's our diagram from last time. So we're kind of zooming way in. So there's our, on the right-hand side, our blood vessel. So our endothelial cells, with those that are the little circles, our vascular smooth muscle cells. I'm just going to give up on this pointer in a second. Endothelial cells, vascular smooth muscle cells, our motor end plate. So here's our neuron that's releasing neurotransmitter. I'm going to do it again. So an action potential comes down, this motor neuron releases neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. That neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. The acetylcholine causes the skeletal muscle fiber to contract. And remember, in the action potential, as this is all happening, we've got potassium coming out of the cell. And that potassium is just diffusing along its concentration gradient, as ions and everything always does. So part of the potassium is going to enter the bloodstream. One more time. Action potential, potassium getting expelled out of the skeletal muscle fiber, coming into contact with the blood vessels there, and then those get detected and causes smooth muscle relaxation. And that is released in proportion to the muscle activation, which you can imagine, right? Like as the muscle's contracting, if you have more muscle contracting, more mass contracting, you've got that requires more action potentials, more potassium being expelled from the cells, more potassium entering the bloodstream, more vasodilation. So that's why it's proportional to the intensity of the exercise, or of the whatever the activity is. Any questions about that part of the rapid vasodilation? Okay, so in summary, the feed-forward regulation, which is that first phase, we've got muscle blood flow equal to the pressure gradient times vascular conductance. We know we can increase this pressure gradient using the muscle pump, which is a mechanical stimulus, because we're literally squishing the blood vessels. And then vascular conductance, these are these rapid vasodilators that are increasing conductance chemically. So potassium. Cuckoo. Okay, what about the feedback? So phase 2. So we've got this, but those stimuli are going to kind of reach a plateau here. So they cause the initial increase, and then the influence of those is going to kind of level off. But then we get the second increase in muscle blood flow that happens. Because again, this is a step increase, right? So we're not increasing in intensity. If we were increasing in intensity, you probably have more muscle contraction, more of those cells, more of those motor units becoming activated, so you'd have more potassium. So this wouldn't level off, but this is a step increase. So we've set our intensity to a certain level. You've gone, so the muscle is not, the work done by the muscle isn't changing. Does that make sense? So we're hitting this plateau. But then we get this phase 2. So where does that come from? Oh, no, okay. So feedback. This is a delayed onset with slower adaptation, obviously. Here she is. And you can achieve a steady state here. Okay, so this is a different take on the diagram we had on the previous slide. So here's our muscle fiber. Here's our interstitial space, so just like the space inside your muscle in between the muscle fiber and the arterial. And our blood flow is going this way. Contraction! I imagine that fun diagram is us yelling contraction. So as you're contracting, you're producing metabolites, right? So you're breaking down your ATP, you've got your ADP, inorganic phosphates, like all of your I'm not listing all of them here. But you've got all of your metabolites getting formed from the work that's happening at that level of the muscle. What's going to happen with these metabolites? So we've got a whole bunch of metabolite production inside the cell. What happens to those? Oh, you look like you're about to put your hand up.
Oh, they go to the veins to get scale.
So they go out and they follow their concentration gradient, exactly. So first step, they're going to be like, hey, there's so many of us in here, I don't want to be in here, I'm just going to go out here into the hallway / the interstitial space. I'm picturing, imagine we had our full class show up today, burn to everyone that's not here. You guys would all be in here being like, why are there so many people? I'm going to go out in the hallway. So they leave the cell. But now everyone's hanging out in the hallway for some reason in my analogy. So now the hallway is getting really full. So where do you want to go? Into the stairwell in my weird analogy. So they're going to enter the bloodstream. And at the same time, they're, remember, they're going to get detected by all of the metabolic receptors that we've got. They're telling the brain this is where a sympathetic signal is coming from, remember? So the type 3s and 4s are detecting these. And the metabolites here represent an error signal, again, indicating a mismatch between metabolism and blood flow. So the fact that these metabolites are building up here and not all, here they go into the bloodstream and getting carried away. If our blood flow was perfectly matched to the muscle work, the blood would just be taking away all of the metabolites and you wouldn't have any buildup. The fact that we've got metabolites building up here in the interstitial, in the cell and then in the interstitial space, means that our blood flow is not high enough to sustain that level of muscle activity. So that's what that means. It's an error signal. We shouldn't have metabolites building up there. If we're going to continue this exercise forever, we need to be taking away all of those metabolites and delivering new substrate. So the buildup of the metabolites are a signal of we need to increase blood flow. Does that make sense? So it's delayed. We're building up these metabolites. They're entering the bloodstream and getting taken away. We get this vasodilation that occurs in response to the metabolites. A local vasodilation that occurs in response to the metabolites building up. So now we vasodilate. Now more blood flow can go through. Now we can take more metabolites out. And so that's why we're going to stabilize at a certain point. We're not going to vasodilate till the cows come home. We're going to vasodilate to the point that now we're taking away all of the metabolites and we reach a nice balance between metabolite production by this muscle fiber and taking away the metabolites by the blood flow. Does that make sense? Cautious nodding. Does anyone want to ask a question? Oh yeah, and so here we have the metabolites shrinking down to a small font size, showing that our blood flow is taking away these metabolites. Yeah?
It's just the artery or the vein? Because the metabolites will be taken away by the vein.
Yeah.
But then you want to expand your arteries.
Yeah, so remember that they're, in all of our pictures, they're very separated, but remember they're all throughout the whole muscle. And in fact, like, this, I kind of screwed up my drawing, but like, a lot, like if you actually look, I'm talking about an artery and a vein, not arteries and veins, but like, your artery will be here, and your vein is literally like, here. Like, they're right next to each other, and same with your arterioles and venules. So they're definitely getting taken away through the venules, but they're causing vasodilation in the vascular smooth muscle. And if something can get through into the arterioles, they're still going to get taken away because they'll go through those capillary beds. Probably most of the, these are, it depends on how big they are, they can cross. But it's both. They're definitely getting taken away through the venules, and the vasodilation that's happening is happening on the arteriolar side. So I wouldn't get hung up on the detail of where they're entering, because they're all getting taken away. Does that make sense? Any other questions? All right, and finally, to finish this slide off, it's not the metabolites that are being regulated. I don't know if anyone thought it was the metabolites being regulated, but the metabolites are being produced due to the activity that's going on at the level of the muscle. So this is purely a product of intensity at the level of the muscle. But the buildup of metabolites and the concentration of metabolites along each step, because remember this whole thing is a big concentration gradient. So that's why he's got really big font here, medium-sized font here, really small font here. They're constantly following their concentration gradients. And the thing that's determining this concentration gradient is what?
The fact that they were made by the muscle.
Sorry?
The fact that it's the muscle. that-
Yes, great point, sorry, yes, excellent. So that's one side of it is sort of this, the high energy, so the muscle's creating a bunch of metabolites. And then what's the other end of the concentration gradient? What's controlling the other end?
It's flowing.
The blood flow, exactly. Exactly. So the buildup of metabolites, if you have metabolites building up, it's because your muscle blood flow is not high enough. Does that make sense? Thank you. Okay, so in summary, the metabolic hypothesis of feedback regulation of exercise and muscle blood flow. According to the mass and heat flow model, we know that this dictates the movements of metabolites into and out of the interstitial space. They follow their concentration gradients. Easy peasy. The conservation of mass model dictates the concentration of metabolites in the interstitial space. So again, inflow determined by the rate of metabolite production. Perfect, just as Nicole said, so this is intensity dependent. So we're driving this end of things. Nicole, it's like you knew we were going to this slide. Determined by the rate of metabolite production, so it's intensity dependent, so the more muscle's working, the more we're making these metabolites. But then the outflow is determined by muscle blood flow. You guys just want to talk, or? All right, so I know I talked to a couple people who said they're like behind the slides, but does anyone have any questions for me based on any of the stuff that I've presented over the last 5 weeks? Anything that's really unclear before you get Dennis? Okay, so you might have me on Thursday, probably not. I'm guessing it's going to be Dennis. I'm not going to see you guys for like a few weeks, so I'll miss you. Come see me.